I really struggled with these readings, but finally I found one that may be a little strange and offbeat. I am entitling this Entertaining Angels Unawares. Actually, it does take me a while to want to focus and dig into something more deeply. Yet the reading about the Ark of the Covenant, and I'll read you a piece of that later, containing the Ten Commandments on heavy marble tablets that Moses had received directly from God on a distant mountain, captured my imagination. They were being carried across the desert year after year until David's son Solomon built a temple fit for its final resting place in the newly constructed temple in the newly conquered city of Jerusalem. Here are excerpts from the passage from 1 Kings 8 in today's lectionary, New Revised Standard Version. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the ancestral houses of the Israelites, before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. So they brought up the Ark of the Lord, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. The priests and the Levites brought them up. King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel, who had assembled before him, were with him before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and oxen they could not be counted or numbered. Then the priest brought the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, for the cherubim spread out their wings over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim made a covering above the ark and its poles. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone that Moses had placed there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites when they came out of the land of Egypt. And when the priest came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell forever." Then the king turned around and blessed all the assembly of Israel, while all the assembly of Israel stood. Now the Lord has upheld the promise that he made. For I have risen in the place of my father David. I sit on the throne of Israel, as the Lord promised, and have built the house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. There I have provided a place for the ark, in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with our ancestors when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And yet they not only revered, even worshipped it, as an incarnation of the newly revealed to them Yahweh, a name that was actually too sacred to pronounce. And they also had reason to fear it. Although finally housed in the holy temple, it was shut off from the people. It was dangerous to approach too close, as this Baroque painting titled The Chastisement of Uzzah, of the death of Uzzah by Giulio Quaglio the Younger in the Dyer Cathedral in 1704 shows. Calling it just a chastisement did not even begin to describe what happened to him. This little-known story in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and 1 Chronicles chapter 13 shows the tabernacle when it was being carried through the desert by the exiled Israelites before it found its final resting place in the temple in Jerusalem. The man, falling backward, seemingly in ecstasy, made the fatal decision to help right the tabernacle when it seemed ready to slip off the poles. Instead of being praised, he was struck dead, as was the law, because this tabernacle was too holy for a mere mortal to touch. We will get back to that reading later to show its relevance to today's message. Just keep in mind how sacred the tabernacle had become, how reverenced, how sheltered from the common people, the hoi polloi, just out of reach, where only the high priest could visit it once a year. Present, yet not present, one might say. Jerusalem, with its temple and Ark of the Covenant, had thus become the central destination of Jewish pilgrims, not only for the Jews living in the Holy Land, but for the Jews of the various diasporas that had scattered them across the known world. And as I was just mulling over how to make my point about the current relevance of a very old, seemingly outdated and dusty Old Testament passage, an image popped into my mind. It has become a famous statue of Jesus, recently done by a Canadian sculptor, Timothy Schmaltz, a devout Catholic. Now, as a former Catholic, I have vivid memories of depictions of Jesus, such as the one, with the heart exposed, and the resurrected Jesus, and the loving Jesus bestowing blessings on all those who looked reverently at his pictured countenance that he seemed to have posed for. These images, however, took a distant last place in my mind and heart as I meditated on this new idea of Jesus, titled appropriately, Homeless Jesus, seen reclining asleep on a park bench. I will let you look at it for a moment while you contemplate it. There he is, sleeping. His face and hands are obscured under a blanket. It's only the wounds in his feet that reveal his identity. This statue has been described as a visual translation of the Gospel of Matthew, in which Jesus tells his disciples, "As you do it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me." Schmaltz originally intended for the bronze sculpture to be provocative, admitting that's essentially what the sculpture is there to do. It's meant to challenge people. He first offered a placement to St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto, at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, and both churches declined it. One spokesperson for St. Michael said the church declined because appreciating his identity. This is, unfortunately, all too often an issue of discussion among Christians, even debate and sometimes fierce dissension. On a recent post in The Things They Didn't Teach Us in Seminary, one of my favorite posts, a pastor said that a staff person came to her to announce that there was a homeless man sleeping on a bench in their garden, and asking the pastor if she should wake him up and just tell him to move on. Most other pastors gave a very loving response. Treat him as you would Christ. Give him food and drink. Ask him respectfully what he needs, such as food, socks, a blanket. Even more importantly, with or without words, a blessing, a recognition of his essential worth and value. So as I continue, be asking yourselves what you would have done in this very real and all too common situation. Cheryl and I had a deep aha moment like this several weeks ago when we had decided to go on a Benedictine retreat house outing outside the small town of Schuyler, Nebraska. We were there for the weekend. It's a very large retreat house. It was filled with several groups of retreatants and also those in private retreats, as we were. For meals, we all gathered in the very large dining area for a buffet banquet for all meals. By Sunday, however, all the other groups had, gone home, leaving just a few straggling personal retreatants like us to walk the empty halls. As we approached the dining hall, as I was wondering about the disappearance of virtually all of the other guests, we entered the now seemingly cavernous dining hall to find our dinner. 2 cellophane-wrapped trays with a green salad, 2 cookies, a hard-boiled egg, a bag of chips, and a big sandwich made out of lots of meat and cheese. This caused us to pause. We have become vegetarians, mostly vegans actually, so not only the meat, but the cheese and eggs were both off our usual diet. But we were actually pretty hungry, and another value to us, in addition to not eating animals, even animal byproducts such as eggs and cheese, came into a head-to-head ethical clash with another value we both hold dear, which is not wasting food. As we both, in our own way, went through this moral dilemma, we decided almost simultaneously it's better to eat our taboo food rather than to let it spoil in the empty cafeteria. Cheryl thus picked up her tray to take it outside to sit at a table right next to the lake, while a small family, a mother, a teenage daughter, and two smaller sons, walked up to me. The mother asked me a question my limited hearing could not comprehend, so I turned to the newly returned Cheryl to seek her help to interpret. Evidently, they were all retreatants and had come for the buffet, which, as I've already explained, was not laid out for just the two of us, just the cellophane-wrapped things we weren't supposed to eat. Evidently, they had not known that they had to sign up separately for each meal they wanted when they'd registered, but they'd missed that notice. So there they were, all looking at my own lonely, tantalizing meal of salad, chips, meat and cheese sandwich, and lastly, 2 cookies. The little boy's eyes were especially drawn to the cookies, as actually mine had been. I quickly did the math in my head. 1 meal divided by 6 people was woefully inadequate. So more quickly than Cheryl could calculate, I offered them both of our meals. Cheryl went along and went back outside to bring back in the other meal. Still not enough, just 2 meals, even if we just gave both of them and left. Cheryl always has snacks with her, and there was a vending machine somewhere on the premises, I was sure. But it still seemed a bit inadequate, until I remembered the extra bread, butter, peanut butter, and jams and jellies, and the fruits that were always in the kitchen. I motioned to the 2 little boys, and I just took them by hand to show them what had quickly turned into an unexpected and unplanned feast. Then led them to the free drinks, lemonade, orange juice, tea, or coffee for the adults. What had started out as a moral dilemma for us had turned into a wonderful opportunity to welcome those earthbound angels to a table of grace and bounty. On that note, we left them to their dinner. We then just decided to go to the small town and had a wonderful Mexican dinner, topped off by a trip to DQ and a peanut butter parfait for me, not usually on our diet. As we were leaving the retreat house the next day, the very same family was walking down the hallway and spotted us. They approached, and the teenage daughter, then mother, having digested their unexpectedly abundant meal from total strangers, and who had had a chance to think about it more fully afterwards, were very thankful for what we had given them the night before. All I could think to say to them with deep meaning was, it was our joy. And it was. We saw them as fellow travelers, recognized their need, found a way to offer it fully and lovingly. I hope that will be the case next when I meet another stranger in need, knowing even more deeply that they are simply angels in disguise. Before I move on, I remembered a similar story from my son. He'd just gotten out of prison and was living in a motel, waiting for his parole officer's approval to move in with his father. His future uncertain, his past bleak, he was walking back to the motel with lunch in hand when he encountered a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk. Without thinking, he stopped, handed him his lunch, and walked on. I like to think that some of the lessons I taught him as a child were largely responsible for his compassionate actions. Now, I expect you to think, or even hope, that I forgot the story about the Ark of the Tabernacle, the sacred container of the Word of God, the 10 Commandments Moses had brought down from the mountain, but I haven't. For these ancient Jews, ancestors of present-day Christians, they deeply reverenced the Ark of the Covenant, but it was preserved and reserved in the tabernacle for the high priest only to see once a year. Yet as Jesus died on the cross One of the gospel writers wrote that the veil of the temple was rent asunder, leaving it open to view. Now, in the message, there was no separation of the holy from the hoi polloi, the common people. Like the family and I met, and then knew that they were angels in the flesh. Angels we were empowered, no, commanded to feed. In our home, we have an icon, which I actually have put up over me. Some claim it's a feminine depiction of the Holy Trinity, Mother, Daughter, Spirit. But I think it is the open faces and hands of these three angels, not facing one another, but sitting at a table open, facing out to us, because they realize that we are all messengers of God, which is what angel means, and receiving blessings and giving them to one another. So please, let's take hands and step into this picture together. We must go further than Uzzah dared when he reached out to steady the tabernacle and died for his audacity. We are now, each and every one of us, tabernacles of God's presence on earth.